Welcome to Some TV Movie Channel, your home for amazing movies and non-stop entertainment. Get ready to enjoy blockbuster hits, timeless classics, and exciting stories from every genre. Whether you love action, drama, comedy, or adventure, there's always something to watch here. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest uploads. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the movie experience with Some TV Movie Channel. American Sniper is a 2014 American biographical war drama directed and co-produced by Clint Eastwood. The screenplay was written and executive produced by Jason Hall and is based on the memoir of the same name by Chris Kyle, co-written with Scott McEwen and Jim DeFelice. The film tells the story of Chris Kyle, who became the deadliest sniper in U.S. military history. Across 4 tours during the Iraq War, he recorded 255 kills, with 160 officially confirmed by the U.S. Department of Defense. While Kyle earned widespread recognition for his extraordinary military achievements, his repeated deployments took a profound emotional toll on both him and his family. Bradley Cooper stars as Chris Kyle, alongside Sienna Miller as his wife, Taya Kyle. The supporting cast includes Luke Grimes, Jake McDorman, Corey Hardrict, Kevin Latch, Navid Negaban, and Kerr O'Donnell. American Sniper premiered at the American Film Institute Festival on November 11, 2014. It received a limited theatrical release in the United States on December 25, 2014, through Warner Brothers Pictures, followed by a nationwide release on January 16, 2015. The film received generally positive reviews, with critics praising Bradley Cooper's powerful performance and Clint Eastwood's direction. However, it also sparked debate over its portrayal of the Iraq War and Chris Kyle's legacy. Despite the controversy, American Sniper became a massive commercial success, earning more than $547 million worldwide. It finished as the 13th highest-grossing film of 2014 and remains Clint Eastwood's highest-grossing film to date. At the 87th Academy Awards, the film received 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Actor for Bradley Cooper. It ultimately won the Academy Award for Best Sound Editing. The story begins in Texas, where a young Chris Kyle learns to shoot a rifle and hunt deer under the guidance of his father. Years later, Chris has grown into a ranch hand and rodeo cowboy. After returning home early one day, he discovers something that changes the course of his life. After discovering his girlfriend in bed with another man, Chris ends the relationship and asks her to leave. Shortly afterward, he watches news coverage of the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings, an event that inspires him to enlist in the U.S. Navy. He successfully completes the demanding selection process, undergoes specialized training, and earns a place as a sniper with the U.S. Navy SEALs. While in San Diego, Chris meets Tyrene Studebaker at an Irish pub, and the two quickly fall in love and get married. Following the September 11th attacks, Chris is deployed to Iraq. During his first combat mission, he is forced to make a heartbreaking decision when a woman and a young boy attempt to attack a U.S. Marine patrol with a Russian-made RKG-3 anti-tank grenade. Although the experience deeply affects him, his remarkable skill as a sniper soon earns him the nickname Legend. Chris is later assigned to help track down Al-Qaeda leader Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. During the mission, he interrogates a local family whose father agrees to lead the SEALs to the butcher, al-Zarqawi's ruthless second-in-command. However, the operation takes a tragic turn when the butcher captures the father and his son, brutally killing both while an enemy sniper named Mustafa keeps Chris pinned down. Mustafa, a former Syrian Olympic medalist, proves to be a deadly marksman. At the same time, insurgents place a bounty on Chris's head. After returning home, Chris reunites with Taya and welcomes the birth of their son. Although he is physically back, his mind remains trapped by the horrors of war. Haunted by his experiences, he struggles to reconnect with his family, while Ty desperately hopes he will focus on their life together. Chris soon begins a second deployment and is promoted to Chief Petty Officer. During another dangerous operation, he helps eliminate the butcher. However, each deployment pushes him further away from his family. When he returns home to meet his newborn daughter, the emotional distance between him and Ty has grown even greater. On his third tour, Mustafa seriously wounds fellow SEAL Ryan Beagle's job, forcing the unit to retreat to base. Despite the setback, the team later returns to continue the mission. During the operation, another SEAL, Mark Lee, is tragically killed in combat. Driven by guilt and a strong sense of duty, Chris volunteers for a 4th deployment, despite Taya warning him that she may not still be there when he returns. Back in Iraq, Chris is devastated to learn that Ryan Job has died during surgery from the injuries he sustained. Chris is then assigned to eliminate Mustafa, who has been targeting U.S. Army combat engineers constructing a barricade positioned on a rooftop deep inside enemy territory. Chris finally spots Mustafa and makes an extraordinary long-range shot from approximately 2,100 yards, 1,920 meters, killing him. The successful shot immediately reveals his team's position, triggering a massive assault by enemy fighters. As ammunition runs low and the firefight intensifies, Chris tearfully calls Taya and tells her he is finally ready to come home. A powerful sandstorm provides enough cover for the team to escape, although Chris is wounded and nearly left behind during the chaotic retreat. After returning to the United States, Chris struggles to adjust to civilian life. Constantly on edge, he finds it difficult to leave the battlefield behind. During a session with a Veterans Affairs psychiatrist, he is asked whether he is haunted by the people he killed during the war. Chris admits that what truly haunts him is not those he killed, but the fellow soldiers he couldn't save. The psychiatrist encourages him to work with severely wounded veterans at the VA hospital, giving Chris a renewed sense of purpose. Over time, helping others allows him to slowly reconnect with his family and rebuild his life. Years later, on February 2, 2013, Chris says goodbye to Taya and their children before heading to a shooting range with Eddie Ray Rawat, a military veteran struggling with PTSD. An on-screen subtitle later reveals that Chris was tragically killed that day by Rawat. The film concludes with real archival footage showing thousands of people lining highways during his funeral procession, followed by scenes from his memorial service honoring his life and military service. Development of the film began on May 24, 2012. When Warner Brothers acquired the rights to Chris Kyle's best-selling memoir. Bradley Cooper was attached to both produce and star in the adaptation. Although Cooper initially considered Chris Pratt for the lead role, Warner Brothers agreed to purchase the rights only if Cooper himself played Chris Kyle. In September 2012, David O. Russell expressed interest in directing the project. Following Chris Kyle's tragic death on February 2, 2013. The film gained even greater significance. On May 2, 2013, Steven Spielberg officially joined as director. After reading Kyle's memoir, Spielberg envisioned a more psychological approach, emphasizing the rivalry between Kyle and an enemy sniper. His ideas expanded the screenplay to nearly 160 pages. However, due to budget limitations at Warner Brothers, Spielberg ultimately felt he could not fully realize his vision and stepped away from the project on August 5, 2013. Just a few weeks later, on August 21, 2013, Clint Eastwood was announced as the film's new director. Casting continued throughout early 2014. Sienna Miller joined the cast on March 14, followed by Kyle Gallner and Corey Hardrict on March 16. Navid Negaban, Eric Close, Eric Layden, Ray Gallegos, Jake McDorman, Luke Grimes, and Sam Yeager were all added over the following weeks. Former Navy SEAL Kevin Lynch also joined the production, serving both as an actor and as the film's technical advisor to ensure military authenticity. Another former Navy SEAL, Joel Lambert, joined the cast as a Delta Force sniper. On June 3, Max Charles was cast as Chris Kyle's son, Colton Kyle. Principal photography began on March 31, 2014, in Los Angeles, with additional filming taking place in Morocco. On April 23, the Los Angeles Times reported that a 10-day shoot for scenes set in an Afghan village would begin at the Blue Cloud Movie Ranch in the Santa Clarita area. By May 7, filming had also been spotted around El Centro, California. A former milk factory was transformed into the abandoned date factory featured during the film's climactic battle, where insurgents surround the location from every direction. The pier and bar sequences were filmed in Seal Beach, California. Cinematographer Tom Stern shot the film using Arri Alexa XD digital cameras paired with Panavision C-series anamorphic lenses. American Sniper became Clint Eastwood's second digitally filmed feature after Jersey Boys. Unlike many of his previous films, there is no traditional music by credit. Eastwood, who has composed the scores for most of his films since Mystic River, 2003, is credited only for Ty's theme. Joseph Tibisi served as the composer of the additional music and also worked as the film's music editor. The soundtrack features Van Morrison's Someone Like You, heard during the wedding scene. while the funeral by Ennio Morricone plays during one of the film's emotional closing moments. Produced on a budget of approximately $59 million, American Sniper earned $350.2 million in North America and $197.5 million internationally, bringing its worldwide box office total to $547.7 million. After factoring in all production costs and revenue streams, Deadline Hollywood estimated that the film generated a profit of approximately $243 million, making it the second most profitable film of 2014, behind only Transformers: Age of Extinction. The film became the highest-grossing war movie of all time, surpassing Saving Private Ryan, and remains Clint Eastwood's highest-grossing film as a director. It also became the seventh R-rated film to surpass $500 million worldwide. In North America, American Sniper finished as the highest-grossing film of 2014. It became the highest-grossing war film in unadjusted box office history and, when adjusted for inflation, ranked second only to Saving Private Ryan. It also became one of the highest-grossing R-rated films ever, ranking behind titles such as The Passion of the Christ, Deadpool, and Deadpool Wolverine. For Warner Brothers, it became the studio's fourth highest-grossing release at the time, trailing only The Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Rises, and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows A Part 2. The film also ranked among the highest-grossing Best Picture nominees in history, alongside blockbusters such as Avatar, Titanic, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Toy Story 3, and The Lord of the Rings trilogy. It became the seventh Warner Brothers film to earn more than $300 million in the United States and Canada and the 50th film overall to reach that milestone. Remarkably, its domestic earnings matched the combined box office totals of all the other 2014 Best Picture nominees. On March 8, 2015, American Sniper surpassed The Hunger Games: Mockingjay Part 1 to become the highest-grossing film released in 2014. It was the first R-rated movie to achieve this since Saving Private Ryan, 1998, and the first non-franchise film to top the annual box office since Avatar, 2009. The film premiered at AFIFest on November 11, 2014, immediately following a screening of Selma at Grauman's Egyptian Theatre in Los Angeles. In North America, American Sniper received a limited theatrical release on December 25, 2014, opening in just 4 theaters: two in New York, 1 in Los Angeles, and 1 in Dallas. It earned $610,000 during its opening weekend, or $850,000 including Christmas Day, averaging $152,500 per theater and debuting at number 22 at the box office. The following weekend, while still playing in only 4 locations, the film earned $676,900, averaging $169,277 per theater. This became the second highest per theater weekend average ever for a live-action film, behind Moulin Rouge. 2001. Over its 3-week limited release, the film collected $3.4 million and set a record for the most appearances in the all-time top 20 weekend theater averages. The nationwide release began on January 16, 2015, with Thursday preview screenings starting at 7 p.m. The film earned $5.3 million from those previews, setting a new Thursday night record for an R-rated drama, previously held by Lone Survivor. On its first full day of release, American Sniper grossed $30.5 million, including Thursday previews, across 3,555 theaters. This established new January records for both the biggest opening day and the highest single-day gross. During its traditional 3-day opening weekend, the film earned an outstanding $89.2 million, more than doubling industry expectations. It shattered the records for the largest January opening, previously held by Ride Along, and the largest winter opening weekend. It also became Clint Eastwood's biggest directorial debut, surpassing Gran Torino. The opening weekend also set several additional milestones. It became the largest opening ever for a drama, overtaking The Passion of the Christ, the second biggest opening for a Best Picture Oscar nominee, behind Toy Story 3, the second largest debut for an R-rated film, behind The Matrix Reloaded, and the third biggest opening for a non-comic book, non-fantasy, non-science fiction film, behind Furious 7 and Fast Furious 6. In IMAX theaters, the film earned $10.6 million, setting new January IMAX opening records as well as a new record for the biggest IMAX debut by an R-rated film, surpassing the previous benchmark set by Prometheus. American Sniper earned $17.2 million over the 4-day Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend, setting a new record for the biggest 4-day opening ever for an R-rated film. In its second weekend, the movie expanded to 3,705 theaters, making it the second widest release for an R-rated film at the time. It brought in an impressive $64.6 million, dropping only 28% from its opening weekend. This marked one of the strongest second weekend holds for a film that debuted with more than $85 million and also became the 8th largest second weekend gross in box office history. Within just 10 days of release, American Sniper surpassed Pearl Harbor's $198.5 million domestic total, becoming the second highest grossing war film in North America. By its second weekend, industry analysts at Box Office Mojo predicted that the film was on track to become the highest grossing film of 2014 in North America, overtaking The Hunger Games, Mockingjay Part 1, thanks to its remarkably strong box office performance and minimal week-to-week decline. The film also became the highest grossing IMAX release ever in January, earning $18.8 million from 333 IMAX theaters. On January 29, 2015, just 35 days after its initial release, American Sniper surpassed Saving Private Ryan's $216.5 million domestic total to become the highest-grossing war film in North America, unadjusted for inflation. During its third weekend of wide release, the film expanded again to 3,885 theaters, adding 180 more locations and breaking its own record as the widest R-rated release ever at the time. It remained at the top of the box office for a third consecutive weekend, earning $30.6 million, the second highest Super Bowl weekend gross in history, behind Hannah Montana Miley Cyrus' Best of Both Worlds concert. After dominating the box office for 3 straight weekends, the film was finally overtaken in its fourth weekend by the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water. Even so, American Sniper delivered the biggest opening weekend of Clint Eastwood's directing career and ultimately became the highest-grossing film he had ever directed in every major market where it was released. Internationally, the film also performed exceptionally well. It opened at number 2 in Italy with $7.1 million, marking Clint Eastwood's biggest opening ever in the country and Warner Brothers' second-largest opening for a non-franchise American film there. The movie climbed to the top of the Italian box office the following weekend. Other major opening weekends included France with $6.3 million, where it remained at number 1 for 4 consecutive weekends, Australia with $4.6 million including previews, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Malta with $3.8 million, Spain with $3.2 million, Japan with $2.8 million, Mexico with $2.6 million, Brazil with $1.8 million, and South Korea with $1.2 million. Outside the United States, the film's biggest markets were Italy, where it earned $23 million, and France, where it grossed $22.8 million. On Rotten Tomatoes, American Sniper holds a 72% approval rating based on 299 reviews, with an average score of 6.9. The site's critical consensus reads, powered by Clint Eastwood's sure-handed direction and a gripping central performance from Bradley Cooper, American Sniper delivers a tense, vivid tribute to its real-life subject. On Metacritic, the film received a weighted average score of 73 out of 100, based on 48 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Opening weekend audiences were even more enthusiastic, awarding the film a rare A+ cinema score, reflecting overwhelmingly positive audience reactions. Critics also praised the film's storytelling and performances. Todd McCarthy of The Hollywood Reporter described it as a taut, vivid, and deeply moving account of the brief life of the most accomplished marksman in American military history. Justin Chang of Variety praised Bradley Cooper's powerful transformation, calling the film an excellent performance from a bulked-up Bradley Cooper and highlighting it as a gripping, intimate character study that explores the physical and emotional cost of war. David Denby of The New Yorker also gave the film a positive review, describing it as both a devastating war movie and a devastating anti-war movie, praising its balanced portrayal of a soldier's extraordinary skill while emphasizing the emotional isolation and suffering that accompanied his experiences. American Sniper received a wide range of reviews from critics, with many praising its performances and direction while others questioned its portrayal of war and morality. Keith Phipps of The Dissolve felt that although the film was skillfully made, it missed an opportunity to explore the emotional and psychological toll that military service takes on soldiers. Chris Nashawati of Entertainment Weekly gave the film a C+, describing it as a repetition of context-free combat missions and one-dimensional targets. Elizabeth Weitzman of the New York Daily News awarded the film 4 out of 5 stars, writing, "The best movies are ever-shifting, intelligent, and open-hearted enough to grow alongside their audience." She believed American Sniper was built on that rare sense of compassion. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone gave the film 3.5 out of 4 stars, praising Bradley Cooper's portrayal of Navy SEAL Chris Kyle and Clint Eastwood's direction. He noted that the film honored Kyle's patriotism without ignoring the heavy personal cost of war, adding that its targets are clearly in sight, and its same is true. A8 out of the AV Club gave the film a B, describing it as imperfect and occasionally sentimental, but also morally complex and characteristically Eastwood-like in its ambiguity. James Berardinelli of Real Views also awarded the film 3.5 out of 4 stars, saying it marked a strong return for Clint Eastwood after several less successful films. Ray Foguzmaitl and of Newsday gave the movie 3 out of 4 stars, praising Bradley Cooper's performance as an American killing machine in Eastwood's clear-eyed depiction of the Iraq War. Kenneth Duran of the Los Angeles Times applauded the film's expertly crafted combat sequences, saying they immersed viewers so completely in the chaos of battle that they almost forgot they were watching a movie. Claudia Buig of USA Today gave the film 3 out of 4 stars, calling it Bradley Cooper's finest work. She praised his physical transformation, convincing Texas accent, and ability to capture Chris Kyle's confidence, intensity, and vulnerability. Joshua Rothkopf of Time Out New York awarded the film 4 out of 5 stars, writing that only Clint Eastwood could make a film about an Iraq War veteran while filling it with uncertainty, emotional conflict, and the devastating consequences of war. Critic Dino Bielda also praised the film, arguing that its true focus was not on America's enemies but on the enormous human cost paid by those who fight. He viewed American Sniper as a cautionary tale about the consequences of war rather than a celebration of it. Despite its acclaim, the film also attracted significant criticism. Matt B. of Rolling Stone argued that the movie reduced the complex moral questions and widespread bloodshed of the Iraq War to a simplistic black and white narrative while failing to provide important historical context. Alex von Tunzelman of The Guardian similarly criticized the film for presenting an overly simplified view of the Iraq War, claiming it blurred the line between historical facts and heroic myths. David Masietra of Salon criticized the film for emphasizing physical bravery over moral courage as the ultimate expression of masculinity. Former cavalry scout and sniper Garrett Reppenhagen objected to the film's portrayal of Iraqi civilians, stating that he never viewed them as savages during his service. He argued that the movie reinforced ignorance, fear, and prejudice toward Iraqi people and their culture. Alonzo Giralda of The Wrap also gave the film a negative review. He felt Clint Eastwood's intense focus on Chris Kyle left the supporting characters, so including Kyle's wife, Tyra, played by Sienna Miller, underdeveloped. Giralda also argued that the film only briefly touched on the broader moral questions surrounding the Iraq War. Several other critics voiced similar concerns about the film's themes and perspective. Responding to the criticism, Clint Eastwood explained that American Sniper was intended to show the lasting impact of war on soldiers and their families. He said that depicting the struggles faced by veterans returning to civilian life, as Chris Kyle did, was the biggest anti-war statement any film can make. Eastwood added that one of his favorite war films he directed was Letters from Iwo Jima, because it focused on family, separation, and the personal sacrifices made during wartime. Reflecting on his own childhood during World War II, he noted that people once believed it would be the war to end all wars. He also observed that, unlike in earlier generations, there is now a greater effort to help veterans cope with the emotional and psychological effects of combat after returning home. Years later, I found myself standing at the draft board during the Korean War. Then came Vietnam, followed by more conflicts. It seems like the cycle never truly ends. You can't help but wonder if war will ever stop, and sadly, it hasn't. That's why every decision to enter or leave a conflict deserves careful thought. These choices should never be made lightly, and they require far more consideration than they often receive. Bradley Cooper responded to criticism of American Sniper by saying that many people misunderstood the film's central message. According to Cooper, The movie was intended to highlight the lack of care and support provided to veterans returning from war. He argued that those who disagree with Chris Kyle's actions should focus their attention on the leaders who sent soldiers into combat rather than the troops themselves. Cooper explained, "We hoped to draw attention to the lack of care our veterans receive. Any discussion that ignores veterans or what we did or failed to do for them moves further away from the reality of what our soldiers experience. The fact that 22 veterans take their own lives every day is the conversation we should be having." He also emphasized that many service members return home carrying deep psychological wounds, only to find themselves largely forgotten or neglected after their military service ends. The film also received public support from former First Lady Michelle Obama and former Republican vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin. Several major news organizations examined the film's historical accuracy and compared it with Chris Kyle's memoir. One notable difference involves the enemy sniper, Mustafa. In the movie, Mustafa plays a major role, while in Kyle's memoir he is mentioned only briefly. Kyle wrote, "I never saw him, but other snipers later killed an Iraqi sniper we think was him." Likewise, the famous 2,100-yard shot described in the memoir was actually aimed at an insurgent carrying a rocket launcher and not Mustafa. According to Time, screenwriter Jason Hall said that Kyle once explained, "He shot my friend. I'm not going to put his name in my book." Another change involves the film's opening battle, where Kyle shoots a young boy and his mother as they attempt to attack American troops with a grenade. The child was created specifically for the film and was not part of the real events. The movie also changes the timeline surrounding Navy SEAL Ryan Beagle's job. In the film, he dies from complications following facial surgery shortly after being wounded in Iraq. In reality, he passed away several years later. Another fictional addition is the character known as the Butcher. Although the character may have been loosely inspired by real individuals such as Abu Dirayah or Ahmed Hashim Abdallah-Zohri, the version seen in the film was created for dramatic purposes. The website Information is Beautiful evaluated the film's historical accuracy and estimated that it was approximately 56.9% accurate when compared with real-life events. While many of the major incidents shown in the movie did occur, the report concluded that Chris Kyle's involvement in several of those events was significantly exaggerated. The film also suggests that Kyle decided to join the U.S. Navy after watching television coverage of the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings. In reality, those attacks did not influence his decision to enlist. One of the film's most widely criticized moments involved the use of an obviously fake baby doll in a key scene. Many critics and audience members found it distracting, and at some screenings viewers even laughed when the doll appeared on screen. While discussing the film's Academy Award chances, Fandango critic Dave Karja joked, "The reason American Sniper isn't going to win is because of the plastic baby." Writing for The Telegraph, journalist Mark Harris sarcastically remarked that the plastic baby would continue to be defended by Clint Eastwood supporters indefinitely. Screenwriter Jason Hall later responded to the criticism with humor, explaining, "Hate to ruin the fun, but Real Baby number 1 showed up with a fever. Real Baby number 2 was a no-show. Give me the doll, kid." At first glance, Chris Kyle didn't look like a legendary soldier. He wasn't towering in height or decorated with countless medals. Instead, he appeared to be an ordinary, rugged cowboy wearing a baseball cap and speaking with a Texas drawl. But once he settled behind a sniper rifle, he became one of the most feared marksmen in the Iraq War. From a rooftop vantage point, with his finger on the trigger, he held the power of life and death in his hands. As an insurgent rushed into the street carrying a grenade and threatening American troops below, Kyle prepared to make a split-second decision that could change everything. A sharp crack echoes across the battlefield. A brief spray of blood follows, and in an instant, one life ends while others are saved. It's a brutal job, but few have ever done it better than Chris Kyle. In real life, Kyle recorded more than 160 confirmed sniper kills, with many believing the true number was significantly higher. His deadly accuracy earned him a fearsome reputation among insurgents, who reportedly placed an $80,000 bounty on his head and nicknamed him the Devil of Ramadi. Yet Chris remained unfazed by the threats, volunteering for 4 combat tours and appearing almost untouchable throughout his service. He seemed to thrive in the harsh Iraqi desert, where the heat and danger felt almost natural to him. Ironically, in Clint Eastwood's American Sniper, it's not the battlefield that poses the greatest challenge, it's home. Returning to civilian life proves far more difficult than surviving combat. Much of the film draws directly from Chris Kyle's autobiography, presenting him as the kind of figure many Americans regard as an unquestioned hero. Early in the story, Chris's father teaches him that there are three kinds of people in the world: sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. After Chris defends his younger brother Jeff from a bully, his father doesn't punish him for fighting. Instead, he simply says, "Well, then you know who you are. You know your purpose." The moment isn't meant to encourage violence at school. Rather, it explains how Chris comes to see himself as a protector, a sheepdog standing between innocent people and those who wish to harm them. He never questions his mission or agonizes over the lives he takes. Unlike many modern war stories that focus heavily on moral uncertainty, Chris operates with unwavering conviction. He believes his purpose is to fight evil, and in his eyes, that evil is represented by the terrorists he targets. While he regrets that his enemies chose violence, he never doubts his responsibility once they do. Ironically, that same clarity makes it difficult for him to return home. Chris becomes convinced that every day he isn't in Iraq, more Americans are dying unnecessarily. The sheepdog within him never stops guarding the flock, even as his wife, Tyre, reminds him that she and their children also need his protection, attention, and companionship. Eventually, a counselor helps Chris realize that his role as a protector doesn't have to end when his military service does. He encourages Chris to support fellow veterans and active duty service members who are struggling to adjust to life back home. Chris embraces this new purpose, mentoring countless soldiers and sailors while gradually becoming a more devoted husband and father. Chris is portrayed as a sincere, though not deeply introspective, Christian. He frequently speaks about his faith in God, his love of country, and his commitment to family, confidently stating that he could stand before his Creator and answer for every shot he fired. A large Crusader cross tattoo covers one of his arms, and he carries a Bible wherever he goes. However, the film notes that he stole the Bible from a church pew as a child, and one fellow Navy SEAL jokes that he's never actually seen Chris open it. That same teammate hopes to become a pastor after the war and wrestles with the moral implications of their mission in Iraq. The insurgents' religious beliefs are acknowledged but receive relatively little attention. At one point, Chris and his team question an Islamic cleric, while elsewhere a Christian pastor quotes passages from the Book of Acts concerning spiritual judgment. Before joining the Navy, Chris competed as a rodeo cowboy. He even hopes that winning a championship belt buckle, a traditional rodeo prize, will impress his girlfriend. Instead, he and his brother discover her with another man, both hurriedly getting dressed, an experience that ultimately pushes Chris toward a new chapter in life. Later, Chris meets the woman who will become his wife at a bar after she turns down another man's advances. Although she initially keeps him at a distance, the two eventually begin a romantic relationship, sharing a kiss before becoming intimate. Several scenes depict the couple in bed under the sheets, with brief partial nudity and affectionate physical contact. Throughout the film, they engage in flirtatious conversations and playful sexual banter. After marrying, Chris and Ty struggle to reconnect physically when he returns home from deployment, highlighting the emotional distance created by long separations. The film also includes a scene in which someone removes a wedding ring while attempting to flirt at a bar. There are occasional jokes referencing incest, masturbation, oral sex, body anatomy, and sexually suggestive phone conversations. Strong language is used throughout, including several uses of the F-word in sexual contexts, along with other crude and sexually explicit expressions. Chris and his hand-picked team try to take down a radical nicknamed The Butcher, and his moniker seems well picked. In perhaps the movie's most horrific scene, the Butcher drags our little boy out into the street. The grandson of a cleric who gave Chris team information, takes an electric drill and drives the bit into the boy's leg. Then, when the cleric makes a move to rescue the lad, he's gunned down as the Butcher drills through the boy's head, leaving him dead in a pool of blood as he shouts out warnings to onlookers. The scene is not filmed from a close-up point of far view, but the suggestion it gives us is terrifying. Later, when Chris closes in on the Butcher, we go into his lair, a supposed restaurant where body parts, including a decapitated heads, are stored. One dead bloody body, presumably someone tortured to death, hangs from chains. In our contrast, Chris owned practically sterile. Most of his kills, and we see many of them, are accomplished quickly and cleanly, accompanied by a small splasher of blood, but his work has its own share of horrors. His first mark is a boy about 12 years old. The kid's mother gave him a grenade to throw at an advancing squadron of American military. Chris shoots him once, and when the mama picks up the grenade to hurl it herself, Chris puts her down, 2. He nearly has it to shoot another child who picks up our weapon and aims it at an Americana column. The SEAL holds his fire longer enough for the boy to finally drop the weapon and run away. Other kills area shown, of course, along with casualties that are on the American side of things. One SEAL is shot in the head, the bullet mangling much of his face. Another, suffering a similar wound, bleeds out. Protracted firefights and grenade attacks producing a high body counts. We see a vehicle drive over a dead body. Back home, when a dog wrestles with a little boy at a backyard party, Chris thinks it's attacking. He runs over, pins the dog with his hand, and pulls off his belt, preparing to beat the beast. Chris shoots a rattlesnake during a training. He puts someone in a headlock. People are pushed around and to the ground. Kids on a playground beat each other bloody. At a stateside bar, a near-macho military guy becomes an impromptu dartboard with a bull's eye on his back. He stands still as his friends throw a dart into him. Several hang in the skeiner on his back. Chris and his brother drink lots of beer. Chris and his SEAL friends pour and drink champagne after Chris's wedding. Music and many quaff beer as well. When Chris first meets Ty at our bar, she's already had a drink or two, and he engages her in a contest involving shots. By the time she staggers out, she's so drunk she throws up. Chris holds up her head so it doesn't get covered in vomit. Special forces vehicles and gear are sometimes laced with the skull of the Punisher, a gun-brandishing Marvel superhero. You don't become a world-class sniper without a laser-like focus on what's in front of you. American Sniper suggests that Chris retained that sniper's clarity and fixation throughout his life. While his comrades may ruminate on the war's purpose and morality, Chris simply concentrates on his job. As others wonder about what might have been, Chris focuses on what is. Chris suggests there's no point in looking back. Those wrong picks put you here. He tells her, made you who you are. If we were able to see American Sniper through Chris' own laser sight eyes, we'd be able to easily reduce it down to its many positives, its heroism and sacrifice, and strong sense of duty and family. Beauty movies aren't meant to be viewed through a scope. They require you to look at everything around you. So the story we're given here is more complex than Chris would deem it and more problematic. It's filled with extreme, sometimes sadistic violence presented to illustrate a point, but nevertheless, and it's crammed with colorful language. Read lots of F-words that accurately reflects the way these men surely talked, but nevertheless. American Sniper is about more than any man's heroism in the midst of war. It's about the high cost of that war on those involved, and it demands that we to feel and see, if not quite to experience, that cost. American Sniper is an extremely well-made, powerful, tragic movie. However, it has too much intense extreme content for media-wise viewers despite its definite patriotic and emotional appeal. As a young boy in Texas, Chris, his father, brother, and a mother go to church and believe the gospel. His father says there are 3 types of people: sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. And his father wants his sons to be sheepdogs who protect the sheep. From his early youth, Chris is an excellent marksman. He also becomes a rough and tumbly rodeo rider. His brother is his sidekick. After one rodeo, Chris comes back to his apartment to find his girlfriend is with another guy. He throws her out after throwing the guy out and then goes to a bar to get drunk. There he picks up the girl who will become his wife. When a crisis happens in the Middle East, Chris joins the Navy SEALs. An expert marksman, he becomes our legend. He shoots men, women, and the children who are trying to kill the Americans and the local allies. On the other side of the battle are the Muslims, jihadists who are cruel and vicious. One is called the Butcher. He uses a drill to torture people and save his body parts on shelves. Chris is given the mission to get rid of the Butcher. However, the Butcher has a protector who's an expert gold medalist sniper in his own right. Meanwhile, Chris's wife here has 2 children at home. But each drive home after a tour of duty, he becomes more and more alienated. Eventually, after killing the Butcher and the sniper, he's ready to return home, but he's not the man who left home. A psychiatrist helps Chris to deal with his extreme psychological pain by helping others. Since this is a true story, many people will know this indeed up as a tragedy. American Sniper is in many ways one of the best contemporary movies about the conflicts in the Middle East. It is full of strong Christian faith, self-sacrifice, valor, and patriotism. It is endlessly captivating and full of jeopardy which keeps you riveted to your seat. Clint Eastwood has done a magnificent job directing this movie. That said, after countless killings, even the audience may become wary. And some of the minor characters will lose faith and courage will resonate with some audience members. Americana Sniper is not an easy movie for sensitive viewers. Chris Kyle, the subject of Clint Eastwood's Americana Sniper, is by official standards the most lethal sniper in U.S. military history. He has over 150 confirmed kills to prove it. Music, and to both the film and the man himself, that's all of these seem to be kills. Faceless, nameless, inhuman figures, proverbial tally marks on his rifle that seem to serve as our indicator of what a hero he is. As a genre about mass violence and trauma, war movies are almost so unavoidably teeming with bloodshed and an array of other unpleasant cries. But what gives the genre its profundity and its race on dietary is how the turmoil can facilitate psychologically and emotionally insightful and compelling ideas. If a war film fails to reach these depths of insight, then it might to at least appeal to the inner savage in all of us, that carnal desire to revel in cinematic violence, symphonies of fire bullets, the aesthetic delight so far gunplay and explosions. But what happens when a war film has the amicable qualities necessary for the genre without any of the catharsis or entertainment value? We get something along the lines of American Sniper, a film whose emotional core is built on such a phony facade and whose action scenes are so familiar and incessant that it feels closer to propaganda or a video game cutscene filler than the powerful and inspiring film that it allegedly is. American Sniper is composed of two narrative halves that are flipped back and forth in orderly fashion. Chris Kyle's life at home with his wife and his 4 tours of duty in the Middle East, except there's a surprisingly darker bit of childhood backstory to start the film and then never re-emerge. And in our reality, the war habs comprise the vast majority of the film, leaving what a little remains feeling undernourished and like the first section essentially unnecessary. Chris Kyle is a Texas cowboy with an affinity for target shooting and a deep-seated sense of patriotism that so ignited the instant he sees the World Trade Center collapse on the TV news. He meets a pretty girl at a bar, wins her over, takes her home, and then marries her, whether out of love or because of her pregnancy. That's really all we know about him, because during the time of war scenes, music, he exudes only the type of battle buddy chatter and surface-level distress that one expects from every single war film in existence. The politics and particulars of his military operations are kept simple, which prevents any potential confusion stemming from too many proper nouns being thrown around, but also omits any sense of reality, weight, or sense of purpose. Here, it never feels like a film about an American out to do unnecessary evil in protecting the citizens of his country against a clever and motivated enemy. As much as the film tries to convince us of that, and as much as Kyle himself truly believed that, it just feels like cowboys and Indians in the Middle East or cops and robbers or some other childish game of absolute good and absolute evil without the slightest admittance that war is never so simple. As the film progresses and Kyle's service rolls on and on, we are expected to take a toll, and to an extent it does. His absence is an emotional burden on his wife and children, one of whom is a plastic dollar apparently, and his time home is marred by constant paranoia and disconnect from a tranquil life. But the film refuses to acknowledge these as the serious, troubling signs that they are. Kyle's constant return to active military duty is obviously problematic and indicative of psychological distress. But Eastwood seems to wholeheartedly embrace Kyle's ignorant beliefs that what he's doing is a heroic and essential endeavor, and that he is specifically responsible for. His wife, written as a classic female non-character, begs him to stay, telling him that he's failing as a father and a husband, and that his real duty is to be there for them, not risking his life in faraway places for less than scrupulous causes. As right as she is, the film just sort of ignores all of the implications of abandonment here, jumping back into run-of-the-mill days and battle scenes before the characters actually have a chance to behave like human beings. Bradley Cooper's Kyle is the only actor actually given a chance to act here, and he performs pretty much competently for what he was given to work with. That the film is seen almost exclusively from his perspective is understandable, but that each and every Arab savage, as the soldiers casually denote them, is either a hysterical nuisance or a hysterical terrorist, perpetuates negative stereotypes in a fashion that could have been simply avoided had the film been willing to even acknowledge the existence of rational and innocent Iraqis. But no, just as the home sinners are plagued by a lack of any sort of humanity, The film was too buzzy at depicting how awful it was for poor Chris Kyle to shoot so many people. Beauty how inspiring it is to witness without really admitting their existence as individual persons, each as important and human as any American man, woman, a child, or soldier. American Sniper fails it to accomplish in 130 minutes what countless films have in 90. It's a competently made, occasionally exciting, and never exactly boring, but it's totally devoid of anything that might render it legitimately worthwhile. The resolution is pathetic and utterly ignorant of the complex array of issues so established throughout the film, and the brevity and nonchalant portrayal of the real-life story's heavy conclusions are almost laughable. The attempt to portray such a morally reprehensible man as our national hero is abhorrent in itself. But that Eastwood couldn't even tell an interesting lie of a story almost adds an insult to injury. The film might as well have been called Call of Duty, Music the movie, because while less amusing than the video game, it certainly has succeeded in capturing the series' notorious adherence to cliché, a repetition, and total disregard for moral and historical truth. Last year, I reviewed Lone Survivor and found it to be an offensively jingoistic piece of American military propaganda that disrespected most of the people who lost their lives in the real-life incident the movie depicted. As such, my expectations going into American Sniper really weren't that high. I also made a conscious effort not to research Chris Kyle or any of the reviews or word of mouth about the movie. For those unfamiliar with the plot of American Sniper, the movie is about Chris Kyle, a Bradley Cooper, a Navy SEAL sniper accredited with more than 60 confirmed kills. The movie, directed by Clint Eastwood, depicts Kyle's foreign tours in Iraq, as well as his relationship with his wife, Sienna Miller, and the effects of war on his life stateside. American Sniper isn't as offensively jingoistic as Lone Survivor, but it also unfortunately isn't anything to write home about. The emotional through theme of American Sniper is the toll the war takes on Kyle's psyche and how it affects his relationships. However, these moments are few and far between in a movie that is very poorly paced and lacks follow-up in its examination of its subject. The movie begins with a condensed look at Kyle's upbringing and how it molded him until being a sheepdog. This sequence is so essential to the story Eastwood is telling, but the brevity of it left me wanting. The movie gives us cliff notes on his childhood, and despite the sequence's importance to the narrative, it felt poorly executed and established a pace that didn't fit with the rest of the movie. Once Kyle enlists and the relationship with his wife Sienna Miller is established, the movie shifts its focus to the combat. In Music fact, given that Kyle spent 4 years in Iraq, a majority of the movie depicts the hell he endured. The war sequences are shot well enough, but save for the final one, they are largely indistinctive when compared to the breadth of modern war movies depicting this particular region of conflict. However, I exclude the final sequence here from that analysis for good reason. It helps the movie reach a level of intensity that ties back to the emotional story of Kyle and his wife in a particularly poignant way. Before the conflict, there's an impressive aerial shot that brings the audience into the sequence while making me wonder where Eastwood was hiding that flair and talent throughout the rest of the movie. That one impressive sequence stands alone. However, in a movie that strains its focus on a few different things at once, Eastwood creates a balancing act, a spreading American Sniper into part a biopic, part war movie, and part a post-traumatic stress disorder awareness piece. He threads the narrative through these filters, and the result is a movie that lacks focus. American Sniper failed to connect with me on nearly all fronts except for the scenes involving PTSD. There are several moments where Kyle stayed aside between tours and encounters PTSD. Yet, these moments, despite carrying the most emotional resonance, failed the rest of the movie by being infrequent and are oftentimes dropped. In one scene, Kyle runs into his brother, Kerr O'Donnell, who is visibly shaken by what has experienced in the war. Yet, there's no follow-up to this encounter. In fact, Kyle's brother isn't referenced at all after this scene. It's one of the strongest and best acted PTSD, music scenes of the entire movie. Yet, it's dropped and ignored after the scene ends. Bradley Cooper earned an Oscar nomination for his role as Chris Kyle in this movie, and I don't really understand why. The moments that should bring out the most emotion from Kyle are with more subtlety than needed by a Cooper. Moments where he reacts to our noise at home rely on audio cues than own any emotion Cooper gives us. Co-opposite performance in the war sequences seem hampered by what I can only describe as the movie bending over itself to depict a Kyle as humbling, stoic, and generally a heroic. By no means is that an indictment on Chris Kyle's character. However, the tone the movie hits with its depiction of Kyle feels hollow and at times disingenuous. Sienna Miller's performance falls victim to a script that carves her character into little more than a plot device. In an Oscar season rife with controversy over a lack of diversity in its nominees, Miller's performance as Taya reinforces the fact that strong female roles are hard to come by. Taya is the sounding board for military wives struggling to comprehend what drives their spouses to return to a war zone. Yet throughout the movie's entirety, there's a noticeable disconnect in Miller's performance. Taya isn't a fully realized character because she's solely a reactionary to Kyle's story. The scene where they first meet in a bar is the only instance where Taya is given any substance, and much like Karen's role later, it's ultimately abandoned. Even though Taya and Kyle's relationship hits an emotional climax in the climactic war scene, there's a scene midway through the movie where Taya listens as Kyle is in the midst of an intense battle. Here, Eastwood chooses to intercut the war scene with reaction shots of Miller's horrified reactions. The effect is nearly laughable because the two scenes could not fit together less. Jumping back and forth severely hampers the tension and shines a spotlight on the utter lack of material Miller has to work with throughout American Sniper. Eastwood handles the end of Chris Kyle's story in as respectful a manner as possible. However, given that Step played such an integral part in Kyle's life and the lives of people around him, I can't help but feel the effects so far PTSD should have been front and center in American Sniper. It's touched on throughout the movie, but it's ultimately secondary to the story and at times glorification of Chris Kyle. In the end, it feels like a squandered opportunity to say something substantial about something that affects so many people. American Sniper failed to connect with me on a variety of levels. This was mostly due to the fact that it presents multiple layers to its story without fully realizing any of them. Clint Eastwood's latest movie is victimized by a distinct lack of focus. It's ultimately a perfectly mediocre modern war movie that became just a little too wrapped up in itself to become anything worthwhile. During an early scene in director Clint Eastwood's American Sniper, Chris Kyle's father tells his preteen sons that there are three kinds of people in this world: sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. With a noble expression on his young face, the boy version of the US military's most accomplished sniper accepts his lot in life to become a sheepdog protector and in turn saddles himself with a grave responsibility. Decades later, high above on the rooftops of failure and remote hot zones, Kyle rested his rifle on a steady base and peered through his scope for insurgent targets. He was credited with the 160 confirmed kills over 4 tours of duty, an unprecedented record. Played by Bradley Cooper, Kyle's status became a mythic, shifting from a cowboy to a patriot, and in time earning the nickname the legend among his fellow troops. And his representation on screen is just as exalting. Music. Since Eastwood has foregone the less dignified episodes of his subject's real life in favor of a romanticized portrait, has a humble and heroic, comparable to our modern-day Sergeant York. The film begins with Kyle sniping during the war and then flashes back to his childhood where his father embeds life lessons about honor and rifle handling. As Kyle matures, he turns into a ruined Juden, a beer-guzzling, chore-spitting, rodeo rider in Texan. But he quickly sets his cowboy aspirations aside after watching 9/11 footage on CNN. He enlists, trains to be a SEAL at 30, and gradually becomes a highly praised sniper. Meanwhile, Kyle meets Taya, Sienna Miller, and falls in love. They marry, and she's pregnant by the time he begins a tour. Intercutting between Kyle's experience on the battlefield and Taya home alone, worrying, Eastwood creates a connection between the two, and therein underlines how those removed from the conflict can't easily criticize it. She remains in support of her husband, of course, but when he returns home between tours, she can see its toll on him. Even if he refuses to acknowledge it, he remains calm and dignified, perhaps for Taya's sake. Though the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder have already begun to set in, our subplot concocted for the film, Kyle and his fellow SEALs face off against a pair of merciless Al-Qaeda, a top man called the Butcher, Mido Hamada, and his sniper or protector Mustafa Sami Sheikh, a former Olympic sharpshooter. Both Al-Qaeda characters are based on real people, but their direct opposition to Kyle has been arranged in service of the film's modern cowboy mentality. Kyle's very black and white worldview sees only good, America, and evil, Al-Qaeda. And so, the film uses Mustafa as Kyle's villainous arch-nemesis. Eastwood and Hall use Mustafa to explain why Kyle keeps going back for additional tours to finally get the guy who sniped so many of his SEAL comrades. Eastwood, whose long tradition of far classical and revisionist westerns remains an impressive contribution to cinema, could not avoid turning Americana Sniper into something akin to an old-fashioned cowboy film. Kyle's need to get the bad guy is much more readily consumable than a complex, irresolvably discussion of how PTSD can actually result in a form of addiction for the thrills of wartime battle thematically explored in The Hurt Locker. Glossing over Kyle's final return to the US and his minor celebrity status with several books and appearances on talk shows and reality TV. The screen story ends after a sudden prelude to Kyle's death. The screen fades to black and presents his ultimate fade in white titles. The final images of the film are sobering photos and video from Chris Kyle's actual memorial service at the Cowboys Stadium in Arlington, Texas on February 11, 2013, and from his burial the next day. Eastwood's choice not to depict or attempt to explain Kyle's death retains his place in reverence, but viewers not already versed in the subject's life or story will walk away with the sense that everything ended rather bluntly and therefore this biopic feels incomplete. What happened to the man who killed Kyle and why did he do it? Answering those questions may have led the film into a serious discussion of PTSD, and that's not what American Sniper wants to be. It's much more interested in and effective as a two-dimensional tale of our American heroes. In addition to saving countless lives through his sharper shooting as a Navy SEAL, in reality, Kyle made several curious claims, as noted in recent articles in Time and The Village Voice, to boost his legend, a lot of which blemish his otherwise pristine golden boy status. One such story, which officials later denied ever happened, involved Kyle getting carjacked. He supposedly shot the two perpetrators and the police let him off because he was the legend. Another of Kyle's stories claimed that Blackwater hired him to take out Lars at the Superdome during Hurricane Katrina. And he told yet another story concerning former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura, resulting in a defamation lawsuit that was lost by Kyle's legal team. Jason Hall's script ignores these and other less glorifiable points in Kyle's life, leaving American Sniper more carefully a maneuvered reorganization and sometimes a fabrication of the facts than a well-rounded biopic. It's all in service of a heroic war film that addresses larger issues, such as PTSD, from a safer distance. This is not to disparage Chris Kyle, mind you, but a film that acknowledges how our heroes are sometimes deeply flawed human beings is more convincing and admirable to a critic than one that refuses to address a particular hero's very human failings. Of the performances, music, it can only be said that Cooper and Miller pour their hearts out on screen. Miller gives us her best turn yet as Kyle's concerned wife who's forced to endure no end of worry and fear at home while her husband is in country. Cooper transforms into our singular presence, having gained an impressive muscle mass for the role and adopted a quiet, honorable sensibility, not unlike Gary Cooper in Howard Hawks' film Sergeant York. Much of what makes this on-screen Kyle so sympathetic is what Bradley Cooper shows us through his vulnerable body language and eyes, has putting on a hardened exterior and suppressing his fear and trauma beneath the surface. And we see evidence of these in Cooper's late expressions. It's a complicated, outstanding performance in our film that's less interested in the psychological effects of war than the statistical outcome of Kyle's kill sheet. Indeed, with his frequent collaborator Tom Stern serving as our cinematographer, Eastwood amps up the violence so it's exciting like an action film, yet gritty and thus more realistic. While the score, credited to several composers of mostly tones and a tempo, serves to create a thrill ride type of experience. With his second film of 2014 after Jersey Boys, the 84-year-old Eastwood takes the easy way out with American Sniper, delivering a film that is both serviceable and respectful, yet would prefer to avoid any uncomfortable truths about its subject matter. The film is less about a reality than creating a romantic hero, the equivalent of the mythic gunslinger. In that sense, It's a shrewdly constructed film that some might call classical, but our understanding of far classicism correlates to the early East to established storytelling which was driven by emotion and mythos and known and not for its representation of reality. This film of Chris Kyle's story is about a myth-making, not authenticity. And while that approach is not by nature or condemnable, the film is somewhat suspect because it's shot and presented in a realistic way. For reality, look elsewhere. Eastwood and Hall construct a very cinematic romantic tale that leaves a little to question. The reality, as always, is far more intricate and is certainly not as black and white. As the saying goes, when the legend becomes a fact, print the legend. Just as the Vietnam War inspired generations of far films, including Apocalypse Now, A Platoon, and Full Metal Jacket, so too has this millennium sojourns into Afghanistan and Iraq, with Jarhead, A Green Room, and The Hurt Locker, prove either the same in recent times. The latest to American Sniper, based on the memoirs of Chris Kyle, credited as the deadly Easter marksman in U.S. military history, takes a slightly different, more personable take here on events, but nonetheless brutally affecting and which illustrates the emotional toll on U.S. forces both during and after the war. A salt of the earth Texan native Chris Kyle Bradley Corpora has ambitions to become a famous rodeo cowboy when he's compelled to sign up to the United States Navy following the deadly bombings of the U.S. Embassy in Africa. His talents and superior concentration make him the prime candidate for sniper detail, with Kyle quickly recruited by the Navy SEAL Special Operations Force. Shortly after meeting a tyranny Sienna Miller whilst off duty, which blossoms into our relationship, Kyle witnesses the September 11th terrorist bombing in New York and knows that he will soon be part of a retaliatory force. Sent to Iraq for his first tour of duty, Kyle earns his stripes in often ambiguous situations with his eyes and reflexes responsibly for protecting ground forces below. As the war becomes protracted and his tour of duties multiply, Kyle becomes more detached from Taya and his expanding family haunted by the compatriots has unable to save. Years spent overseas not only make it harder for him to readjust to civilian life, but also exponentially reduce his own chances of survival, both physically and mentally. The more cynical amongst us might call out to American Sniper for being perfectly timed to capitalize on the height of our Oscar season, the kudos of which can mean millions more in revenue, not to mention feeding the egos of Hollywood's elite. But without doubt, the film deserves its shortlisting for Best Picture, if not the award itself. Whilst too it might be dramatized, and there's even a suggestion that the events behind it might be a little fudged as well. This is a monumental effort of a compelling story combining with authentic characterization and expert direction and staging. From a long career in front of the lens, Clint Eastwood has managed to carve out an equally impressive career behind the camera with 2 Best Director Oscars, multiple nominations, and equal parts critical and financial success. American Sniper just might be his most dynamic film. Not exactly what you expect from a director approaching 85 years of age. Bradley Cooper carries the majority of the weight on his shoulders, a cutting and almost unrecognizable figure from the attractive playboy from American Hustler and an obvious departure from the wisecracks of the Hangover trilogy. Unfolding through his eyes, the film's focus remains unwaveringly on Kyle. Despite the sizable cast of players, including the increasingly marginalized Sienna Miller and his SEAL colleagues, including Lucia Grimes and Max Charles, mirroring the ever-present left-right divide of U.S. and international politics, much has been made of the film's portrayal of war, smearing it with the pro-war label, and accusing the filmmakers of making Kyle's record kill streak into some ill-advised or heroic badge of honor. I found this to be anything but. American Sniper is our monumental film which drives home the great sacrifices, music, including the era and lives in the pursuit of justice and security which fails to halt even after the war, has directed by Clint Eastwood in what some may take as alarmingly short order following Jersey Boys, which was released only 6 months ago. For heaven's sake, American Sniper proves the dictum never counted nor out by proving itself as Eastwood's strongest directorial effort since 2009's underrated Invid is pretty much right out of the starting gate, opening with a brutally suspenseful moment of decision for its titular character Chris Kyle. The movie establishes all of the things it's going to be about and the things it's not going to be about with plain but almost breathtaking assurance. Sniper is based on a true story that got more complicated after Kyle himself told it in the book book that gives the film its title, adapted from the book by actor-turned-screenwriter Jason Dean Hall. Thea's story begins after its Iraq prologue, showing Kyle as first a boy and then a young man. A schoolyard bullying incident compels Kyle's father, Abe and Reed, to give a scary dinner-table fire and brimstone speech to Chris and a younger brother Jeff about showing we're to be tough guys whose boss we protect our own. The weight of expectation seems to jam the two boys down, and in a flash forward to the boys as young men, they're leading the aimless lives of far wannabe rodeo stars. That all changed so when Chris decides to apply to join the Special Forces. The film depicts him doing so after seeing TV coverage of the 1998 attacks on U.S. embassies in Tanzania and Kenya. As he's developing a new sense of purpose while training, he also meets future wife Sienna Miller. Post 9/11, the war in Iraq puts Kyle to work as a sharpshooter. Music and the film depicts his skills in this area as are almost eerie. They were so in real life, too. As it happens, Kyle racked up 168 confirmed kills, making him the deadliest such operative in U.S. Navy history. Eastwood's handling of various battle scenarios, including those in which Kyle is compelled to take down women and children, is typically elaborate for the director. Grim, purposeful, compelling. Violence and its relation to both American history and the American character is one of Eastwood's great themes as both a filmmaker and a film actor. But he is not a director of an overly analytical or intellectualizing bent, and these turns out to be one of this movie's great strengths. It has nothing to say about whether the war in Iraq was a good or bad idea. It simply is, and Kyle is an actor in it, and he's also a devoted husband and father. But Kyle is more than just an actor in the war. He's a true believer in what he's doing, and his intensity in this respect bleeds into his relationships back at home in ways that can't help but be unsettling. When a fellow soldier is killed in our aid, Kyle returns to the U.S. to attend the funeral. At the graveside, a relative of the soldiers reads one of his last letters, expressing doubt and a disappointment about the war. On the drive home, Chris avers to Taya that what killed his friend was that letter. Taya doesn't know how to respond. The viewer likely doesn't either, or at least shouldn't. The role of Taya, well played by Sienna Miller. This and her turn in a Foxcatcher represent a release from a movie jail for the actress could have been another stock complaining military wife in other hands. In this film, she's more complex. She clearly knows that the qualities she admires, loves in Kyle. He's a rigid loyalty and sharp focus. He's a determination to see his commitment to through are inextricable from his identity as a military operative. But even a warrior as devoted as Kyle can't escape being messed with by his mission. As the film continues, music and the sniper's rep grows more fearsome. The nature of his accomplishments gets messy, and by the time the sniper has completed his tour, the viewer has good reason to be a little or more than a little frightened by the guy. But Ty is not. This puts the whole story on an oddly suspended note that, as it happens, is resolved by a real-life ending that's not very Hollywood. Star Bradley Cooper does some of his best acting ever here. Bulked up to make himself resemble, with a respect to body shape, a large-scale 9-volt battery. Cooper suppresses the actorly knowingness he's brought to most of his prior screen roles, and gives his character here a simultaneous credulousness and itch. He feels like a dangerous guy, but not a malicious one. His lack of self-doubt never comes off as alienating in its steadfastness, even at moments when it seems like it's misplaced, as when Kyle finds out for the last time that he can't really be his brother's keeper. Moments such as that one, and they are strewn throughout the movie, are what make American Sniper one of the more tough-minded and effective war pictures of post-Americana century American cinema. Even after returning home from the war in Iraq, Chris Kyle, a SEAL sniper, cannot let go of the horrors he has experienced. This begins to affect his marriage and his life. Where to even begin with these a horrendous piece of Americana militaristic propaganda. This film earned over $500 million at the box office, and it was nominated for 6 Oscars, and those nominations were the big ones, including a Best Actor, Best Picture, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Needless to say, it was a hugely renowned movie at the time, and that is where my biggest issue stems from. Hollywood would say that they are liberal, but they voted for this nationalistic movie from a conservative filmmaker. This just goes to show that when it comes to their foreign policy and interventionism, both liberals and conservatives are the same. very nationalistic. It's the perfect film to showcase just how dangerous America is to the rest of the world. Sienna Miller played a boring female love interest character, and the Iraqi soldiers are depicted as villainous caricatures. Bradley Cooper's protagonist is the only one who got at least some sort of arc. But even his arc was all wrong. There is this intense moment in the film where he was humanized as he let the Iraqi child go. But in my opinion, he was obviously intending to shoot the child and he was ready to do it. So I still found his character and everything that he represents appalling. Cooper did deliver a very good performance and is the only objectively positive aspect in this film, but it was not enough to save it, not by a long shot. There is another very questionable and downright horrifying moment later in the film where one character literally states that the Americans are the sheepdogs protecting the innocent from the wolves because they are endowed with aggressiveness. This is the most apparent and unambiguous admittance of their imperialistic and racist attitudes when it comes to foreign policy, and it was truly shocking to see it spelled out so bluntly. Clint Eastwood is usually a great filmmaker, but here he succumbed to his worst tendencies, making the most to American film in his career and the idea that nobody outside of the US can really appreciate. In fact, I cannot ever imagine anyone outside this country liking this film, as it represents to us all just how wrong their foreign policy is. The technical aspects here are solid, especially the sound and the execution of action scenes. But the movie is overlong, and even discarding the nationalism on display in the horrendous story and messaging, the film would be very tedious and overly familiar regardless. Bradley Cooper himself answered to the criticism directed toward the film's messaging, and he stated that those of us who criticize it missed the point. The point, according to him, is that we should all care more for these soldiers who go through the horrors of war and return home with PTSD. This is fine and all, but am I supposed to care about these soldiers who themselves choose their profession more than the innocent people and children who die in these wars? That is the takeaway here. And it just goes to show that Americans will put their people first and foremost every single time. Nobody put them in this position to fight the wars on everybody's behalf. They themselves chose to act this way due to their undeniable military might, which makes them the aggressive side. Hopefully we will live to see the day when their military supremacy and interventionism end. Remember what I said about my opinion on biopics that I shared during my review of Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. If you don't, then let me remind you I said that I will simply judge them as movies and not how accurate it is to the real life event. And now you will keep that in mind while I review this biopic. In this movie, we follow Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle, Bradley Cooper. Like I just said, he is a sniper for the Navy SEALs, a pretty damn good sniper for them. And we get to follow him as he goes on tours to Iraq to take out terrorists. But we also get to see parts of his civilian life with his wife, Sienna Miller. Now, the plot for the movie was pretty good. I didn't love it like a lot of other people, and I will explain why. Of course, it is interesting to see him go to Iraq and see him shoot the terrorists over there. Those parts are really interesting, and it is interesting to see how he handles family life. However, I felt like the plot was kinda thin. One thing that would have made it more interesting, and even the movie touched ever so slightly, and that is how Carl gets PTSD. We get hints at it in the movie, but it is ever fully explored, which is a shame because it would have made the plot that much more interesting. While the plot wasn't bad, it wasn't that great either. Bradley Cooper was fantastic in this movie. He gave a very nuanced and subdued performance. I have been impressed with some of his later films in recent years. He has really become a terrific actor. I honestly thought all the performances in the movie were good. Sienna Miller was also really good. Despite the performances in this movie being really good, none of the characters were interesting at all. Okay, Chris Kyle was of course really interesting, and his wife was fairly interesting, but everyone else were basically like plastic lawn chairs. They filled the space but did nothing more. One thing that was really interesting about the music in American Sniper is that there barely is any. To be honest, there were only really 3 tracks in the entire movie. And before you started thinking that said 3 tracks would be used to death, they weren't. They were used at about 1 point each. One is Van Morrison's Someone Like You that is used during Chris and Ty's wedding. The second one is Collector's Theme and was done by Clint Eastwood. And the third one is the neo-renowned classic, At the Funeral. And really, I had no problems with the short and really used soundtrack. It gave scenes so much more than if the had music, simply because the studio said, you have to have music there. I know I haven't sounded like the most positive guy so far in the review, So let's give some praise. This movie looks fantastic. But this is something that was really obvious to me, since even though Clint Eastwood has made some not very good movies lately, they have still been a really well directed. Clint Eastwood is a masterclass director, and he shows it here with how he handles the camera work. And the action scenes in this movie are really intense. Whenever I seen that involved shooting in this movie, my heart was pounding, and that is not something that is easy to achieve. The scenes had intensity and they hit hard and really elevated this movie to a whole different level. Also, did you guys also notice the fake baby? It was so pretty weird, just sitting there like a brick in Bradley Cooper's arms. This movie was really well received among people and critics alike. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 72% positive rating with a fresh certification. On Metacritic, it has a score of 7,200, and on IMDb.com, it has a score of 7,410. The movie also won 1 Oscar in the category of Best Sound Editing. It was also nominated for an additional 5 Oscars in the categories of Best Picture, Best Actor, Cooper, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound Mixing. American Sniper is a mixed bag. On one hand, it features a fantastic lead performance from Bradley Cooper, good use of music, excellent and suspenseful sniping, shooting scenes, and some fantastic direction from Clint Eastwood. However, it is brought down a bit by our fairly thin plot and not having that many interesting characters. Time for my final score. Jeff Envelope, thank you. Bullet hits Jeff. Welp, he got sniped. My final score for American Sniper is an 8.62. It is worth buying. It seems irresponsible to review American Sniper without doing so through the lens of the enormous cultural conversation surrounding it. But having actually seen the damn movie, it strikes me as rather bizarre that so many tens of thousands of words have already been spent discussing it without most of them being, accurate. Given the parameters of the dialogue around the movie being so divorced from what seems to me to be its reality, I don't even know how to engage with that dialogue. So sadly, I'm just going to have to treat this like a movie that happened to come out that I happened to see, and we'll all have to pretend that it hasn't already been buried under a mountain of essays from all corners of the political spectrum. So, American Sniper, Clint Eastwood's most thought through, well-mounted, and a thematically snug movie since Lettuce from Uwima, centered on what is far and away the most subtle, insightful, and a nuanced performance that Bradley Cooper has ever given. Indeed, music. I can't think of an Eastwood film since The Bridges of Madison County, which so successfully foregrounds an actor and banks everything else on that actor's performance, doing work that would be impossible if the film tried to approach it any other way. For American Sniper is first and above all about a man who wants to turn himself into a machine. A man born into a value system in a nation at a time where his sense of right demands that he give up a certain measure of his humanity for the greater good, and it resides entirely upon Cooper's performance to communicate what that entails. That and one scene where Jason Hall's screenplay drops a broad-ass line to the effect of, "Aren't you even a human anymore?" into the mouth of the main character's wife, but by Eastwood movie standards, that's almost too inscrutably subtle. The film is adapted from the memoirs of Chris Kyle, self-aggrandizing most lethal sniper in US military history. Though the filmmakers are content to reconfigure him as necessary to make the movie they wanted to, it's impossible to fathom Cooper's version of Kyle bragging in print about slugging Jesse Ventura or whatever the hell it was when he's praised as the legend or reminded of his career kill account. He adopts a pleasant but blank expression that communicates, "That's so nice of you, and can we maybe talk about anything else?" With the silent pleading of a man who's much better at avoiding talking about things than acknowledging them. It's the cousin to the expression he wears when his status-eyed wife, Sienna Miller, talks about how much she and their kids just love it when he's at home. The facial vocabulary of a man who doesn't like feeling emotions and thinking about himself, and found that transforming himself into a military killing machine facilitated that non-fang. The real-life Kyle has, in other words, been retrofitted into our perfect Eastwood protagonist, the clearest of all descendants from Will the Money in the director's 1992 western Unforgiven. He even delivers the money-esque line, It's a heck of a thing to stop our beating heart when taking his son out a deer hunting late in the film. A delivered without money, world weary or fatigue, for that would require introspection, and introspection is something Kyle is thoroughly incapable of performing. A American Sniper illustrates Kyle's mind by fully settling into his warrior pose, which doesn't require or imply that Atar adopts his opinions as its own, but if I resign myself to waiting until 2025 or so to start that fight, which to begin with results in a pretty ingenious structure for a pretty conventional biopic. The opening 20 or 25 minutes start with the future deadliest of the possible snipers about to pull the trigger on his first human victim, and then flashing back to race through our potted history of his life prior to the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, glancing at the big obvious signpost moments like it can't wait to get back at failure. Iraq. It then spends time meandering through his 4 separate tours in country with Eastwood's characteristic bleached out cinematography courtesy of his regular DP Tom Stern, serving as it customarily does to strip all of the sentiment out of a scenario that barely had any to begin with. When Kyle goes home, he spends just enough time with his wife here for her to just barely make an impression on us. I have never ever had much use for Miller before, but the particular impact she makes is so profound with so little screen time that I'm not likely to doubt her again in the near future. And he's always back for another tour without a scene depicting his decision or his attempt to sell either on its merits. In short, the story wants to engage with interpersonal conflict. It blasts through all of the explanatory history that might give us some insight into the protagonist, and it ignores everything in its haste to get back to war. And that is what I mean by settling into Kyle's plof. The filmmaking reinforces this. The excellent sound mix, especially with its layers upon layers of explosions and gunshots at multiple distances from multiple directions. But the editing by Joel Cox and Gary DeRoche, also Eastwood regulars, is equally on point, charging ahead, dowering at the overt action scenes and giving the more languid chatting non-combat scenes an erratic vigor, a constant sense that even if we're relaxed now, we're still in the middle of a war zone. And then there's the more direct matter of how the film frankly depicts the messier suddenness of human death by bullets, small geysers of crimson that pop out of human bodies, Iraqi and American alike, with unromantic proficiency. Music leaving nothing to the imagination. It does not, by any measure I'm able to recognize, suggest that being in war is so exciting. Unlike the very similar The Hurt Locker, nothing in American Sniper suggests that Kyle is an adrenaline junkie or flirts with a death wish, and the increasingly washed-out expressions on Cooper's face coupled with the unyielding desaturation of the images clearly indicate that it's taking a lot out of Kyle to be in that environment. The question the movie focuses on is why he's there and why he keeps going back. Why, after having killed a child, right off the bat, he'd keep placing himself in a position where his only task is to keep killing and killing. The best scene in the film shows Kyle training his scope on a little boy wandering around an RPG launcher, quietly begging him not to pick up the weapon, not wanting to shoot another child, feeling visibly sick at the thought of killing another child. And yet, it plainly does not occur to him as an option not to kill the child if it comes down to it. Why does Kyle do this? The film silently asks, and then it even more silently answers. Because he doesn't have the imagination to conceive of anything outside of the moral code he has always lived by, even when it causes him anguish. Even when his wife, importantly, the only other human in the film, given even the vaguest semblance of an inner life, tells him straight to his face that his beliefs are wrong and are causing pain. Even when his greater shall be a hero and slay the dragon in a moment is reckless and ends up putting the exact same American soldiers he was heroically saving into more active danger than if he just sat there and done nothing at all. He wanted to turn himself into a machine, and he succeeded in doing so, and the movie stares at him without judgment or praise as he goes about that process. And when his refusal to look inside himself means that he can't neither acknowledge privately nor even consider as a possibility the reality that the actions he has committed and the actions he has witnessed have caused him to suffer from PTSD. The movie starts non-judgmentally at that, too. But the longer it goes on, the more it trusts you to see that disorder peering out from behind Cooper's increasingly flat eyes and understand that his desire to avoid a human feeling is increasingly a desire to avoid naming his own suffering and thus his own perceived weakness. All of which makes it epically frustrating when the movie ends by descending into our maudlin arch-biopic sequence of leading up to Kyle's death while back home in Texas. playing as a straight-face Ada version of the same life is happening, a montage that's used to such mercilessly ironic effect in the film's opening and ending on the corniest he's off to meet his death scene since the penultimate scene in 2012's Lincoln. And having to use pointlessly his own movie, Eastwood doubles down with a travesty of a montage of images from the real-life Carl's funeral and memorial services, a sequence that's exploitative to begin with. And also Mooney plays up the notion that this was an unambiguously wonderful man whose passing is much to be mourned, which is found nowhere else in the movie, and indeed is almost exactly contradicted by its persuasive argument that this was a prickly man whose refusal to look inside himself caused only suffering in himself and to others. It's a different, vastly worthy movie. The movie, in fact, that American Sniper has been accused of being by liberals and praised for music being by conservatives, but that emphatically isn't for some 127 of its 132 minutes. But oh me, oh my, how shittily pandering those 5 minutes are. Meanwhile, is it racist? Not really, but it doesn't do a very good job of inoculating itself against that charge. There's one scene in particular involving a mid-up insurgent assassin with a penchant for drills that doesn't serve any meaningful narrative purpose and provides armors to the entire basis for the argument that the film as a whole presents the Iraqi people as bloodthirsty brutes. And that isn't quite a slam dunk piece so far, evidence given context. Mostly though, American Sniper simply doesn't care very much one way or another about the people of Iraq, an apparently damning statement until we mention as well that it doesn't care any way or another about any American citizen, music, or soldier whose surname isn't Kyle. This is a character study, not a political statement, music. And the only real sin it commits is presenting that study in a framework that is entirely impossible to strip off our politics and could only be perceived otherwise by somebody with a reflexive American trick worldview, a synth that somehow didn't taint the equally apolitical Hurt Locker despite that film actually coming out when the Iraq War was still officially ongoing. That being said, it's a marvel as a character study driven by a superb central performance and unpolished spare filmmaking and writing that allow that performance to be the motive for so far everything else the film does and is. Some of what it is ambivalent to the point of being problematic. A tiny bit of what it is acutely vile, and most of what it is a smart, composite portrait of a largely fictional man who desperately wanted not to be complex at all. What the film's reception reveals about American culture is uniformly discouraging and depressing. But as a 2.25-hour piece of cinema made by an inconsistently great director who got his mojo back in a huge way after too many years of burnished mediocrity, I come about is close to loving American Sniper, music, and with its ugly-ass flaws, I wouldn't trade it away for anything. In all of the media hubbub surrounding American Sniper's unprecedented $89 million haul this past weekend, many commentators have been quick to call its subject Chris Kyle a real-life Captain America. This reveals a lot about the picture's relationship to an idealized American hero, whatever that looks like, and is a good entry point into discussing the film itself. American Sniper is an ambivalent war picture about a jingoistic action hero who racked up the highest kill count in American military history. It is based on a book written by that hero, Chris Kyle, and follows his perspective while serving in the US military, depicting the world as he saw it, good and bad. It shows his loyalty, his racism, his patriotism, his refusal to recognize his own PTSD, music, and his own stalwart belief in the US mission in Iraq. Does all this make the film patriotic or conservative or even jingoistic? I'm not convinced that depiction equals to endorsement here. Nor do I think that the film is unquestioningly supportive of the war on terror. It just follows our soldier who is. Moreover, American Sniper is a fascinating film. Regardless of that debate, it is tense, often thrilling, conflicted, and curiously ambivalent towards its character's mindset. It depicts a conservative US Navy SEAL sniper who believed he embodied American ideals by killing Iraqi insurgents. And it lets us sort out what that says about America in the here and now. Clint Eastwood's film begins with Chris Kyle, played by Bradley Cooper, who tones down his natural charisma and lets the character's physicality do much of the talking for him on a rooftop in Fallujah, spotting for threats to an Americana convoy moving through town. He spots our guy on a roof talking on a cell phone, A then sees a woman holding a grenade move into the street with her son. Does he shoot? Eastwood doesn't answer the question right away. He cuts back to Carl's childhood where his father teaches him to use his natural aggression to defend the defenseless Toby, a sheepdog instead of a wolf or a sheep in his father's parlance. Kyle clutches to the role like a dog to a bone. In the following scenes where we see Kyle working in the rodeo and then joining the SEALs, he is trying his best to create the narrative that he is a sheepdog, a defender of justice and a protector of the innocent instead of just another wolf. It's pertinent to remember that this movie is based on Kyle's memoir, which means that it's based on a man writing his own narrative. Kyle tried throughout his life to live up to the expectations of our good patriot, to be a real-life Captain America, if you will. The fact that he lived up to it in many people's eyes, or that he might never have lived up to it, or perhaps even that his worldview allowed the government to turn him into an impersonal killing machine, gives the film its interesting wrinkles despite the fact that it's based on his supposedly triumphant first-person account. This tension makes Americana Sniper fascinating and worth dissecting. Just because a man says he's a patriot doesn't mean we ought to believe him, nor does it mean we should immediately dismiss him. Kyle speaks of king insurgents in order to save his fellow soldiers and stop terror from spreading to the US. But he wears a Punisher emblem on his helmet and on his ammunition cartridges like he's a character out of a comic book. He talks of duty to God and country and family. But he never reads the Bible. He carries with him and seems eager to leave his family when enjoying shore leave. Kyle is a contradictory figure. The film doesn't ignore these contradictions, even if it never makes a grander declarative statement about them either. It's also important to understand that Kyle isn't the director of this film. Clint Eastwood is a man who's made either a career of exploring the relationship between violence and masculinity and whether men can never abandon their violent pasts. Be sure to keep that authorial distance in mind. After showing Kyle's formative experiences, which include his joining the SEALs and meeting his wife Sienna Miller, we go back to that rooftop in Failure and follow Kyle through 4 tours in Iraq. American Sniper doesn't give much of an external perspective to any of DC tours. We're never even sure of what year it is. There are scenes of Ty at our home in Texas, but they're always connected to Kyle's direct experience in some way, like through a phone call. We're experiencing the war as Kyle does, not as an objective observer would. These experiences are often tense and terrifying. Being a sniper is all about patience, and Eastwood is patient in depicting the film's numerous action scenes. His camera isn't chaotic. He loves to push in on Kyle's face as he's looking down at the scope of his rifle. The camera tracks parallel to the barrel, emphasizing the natural lines on screen. He favors a point-of-view perspective from the scope in many instances, spying on possible targets, allowing us to feel the tension of whether Kyle will or won't shoot. Eastwood knows what he's doing here, and his best scenes are as tense as moments from Catherine Bigelow's The Hurt Locker. However, note all of American Sniper is as expertly crafted as the scenes on tour in Iraq. Some of the scenes of Kyle at home with his wife and kids grow tiresome as Toye constantly protests Kyle's abandonment of his children to do another tour of duty. Perhaps Sienna Miller's representation of Kyle is true to reality, but she feels the stereotypical role of the nagging wife. Here frustrations are understandable. Beauty that so much of her characterization relies on them is disappointing. Surely Kyle had other struggles that defined her as much as her frustration with Kyle's absence. But then again, this is a character study of Kyle, or at least of how Kyle wanted to see himself. Perhaps he put Ty into the role of the nagging wife in the narrative of his life and career. Another unanswered question, another complexity. Eventually, Kyle finishes his tours, and we follow him back home, where he struggles to readjust to normal life away from other soldiers. He even seeks out to help wounded veterans, not seeing his mission to protect his fellow soldiers as finished. The film closes with real-life scenes of Kyle's funeral. Title cards indicate that he was killed by a fellow veteran suffering from PTSD, complete with patriotic flag waving and military salutes. I was reminded of John Krakauer's Where Men Win Glory, the Odyssey of Patrolman, about a very different American soldier fighting in the war on terror. While Tillman's a liberal atheist contrarianism and Kyle's a traditional conservatism are as far apart politically as you can get, both men saw themselves as unequivocally doing what was right by joining the military. Both men also fueled the military propaganda machine, directly or indirectly. Their narratives were co-opted and became another narrative here that served another purpose. Is Clint Eastwood's American Sniper further fuel to the propaganda machine that drives recruitment and glorifies trauma-ridden soldiers? Or is it simply commenting that this is the state of the United States military culture? Whether the viewer agrees with it or not, Clint Eastwood is too smart an individual to blindly glorify a killer of hundreds without questioning what drove him. This is the man who made Unforgiven after all. American Sniper is a fascinating look at this complicated man, the American killer. Chris Kyle might not have been a real-life Captain America, but a significant number of people believe he was. Eastwood's film explores why so many people do and what that says about America. American Sniper indeed. American Sniper is a movie, music directed by Clint Eastwood, which has been getting a lot of attention. Way more attention than I expected it to get to at that. And I don't quite know what to make of that. I mean, a major blockbuster in January. Clearly, this isn't the first time a movie has gotten caught up in the hype only to end up being not all that incredible when viewed as a film. The interview anyone. The politics of a film detracts from the film itself undoubtedly, and because of that I don't want to delve into the controversy over American Sniper, because the real truth is that regardless of my political leanings I didn't really enjoy this film. The film stars Bradley Cooper as the anonymous sniper. Chris Kyle has been labeled the deadliest sniper in our U.S. military history. Kyle served 4 tours as a United States Navy SEAL in the Iraq War, amounting in a total of 10 years served. He was later murdered in 2013. Cooper arguably is the best part about this movie. His performance is nuanced, and considering his is the only character that really has any substance to it whatsoever, it stands out. Aside from Cooper's character and from time to time his wife's Sienna Miller, there is no entryway into having sympathy for any character in this movie. When one of Cooper's buddies dies in battle, there isn't any emotional resonance, and at times, there is only the question as to who the man was in the first place. It is this emotional detachment that leads to where the heart of the problems lie with this film. The flaw is not in Eastwood's direction or in the intricate sound work or cinematography, but in the concept of the film itself. It is quite possible to dig your way into Cooper's character, but beyond that, the movie is left to flounder. It would be hard to call this an action film, so the sequences that show the Iraq conflict are purely there for their aesthetic value. This is simply because after the opening scene of the film, it is established that Kyle's job was often at times difficult, where he was forced to aim at women and children. After that scene, the battle sequences do not do anything to further his character. The soldiers that Cooper engages with are more properly developed, perhaps these scenes would act to show the stereotypical theme of war movies, that war is hell, without the emotional connection to any other soldier. The scenes of Cooper laying prone and eyeing down possible targets don't do anything to enhance the film, and these scenes are a large portion of the film. The remaining scenes of the film, music where Cooper is back in the States, do act to show the struggle that I saw returning to everyday life after experiencing the trauma of war. Music but these scenes are disjointed and disproportionate to the portion of the film that takes place in a war zone. A lot of Clint Eastwood directed films are quite terrible. I found $1 Million Baby and Vidas and J. Edgar unwatchable. Gran Torino was made watchable only because it embraced the cranky old man chasing kids off his long cliche so earnestly that its badness was somewhat hard to look away from. Sully was our weird attempt to turn the National Transportation Safety Board, a government institution tasked with ensuring that every plane, train, and a bus you ride in the United States is safe, into a villain. And yet, his popularity as a director endures, so clearly, his films, their tone, content, and style are speaking to a part of America that I don't really get. With the benefit of hindsight, this should have given some warning as to the sandwich that was coming down the pipeline. When it was released in 2014, American Sniper blew up the box office. It grossed $350 million in the US and almost $550 worldwide. It was a runaway hit that found a home in the hearts of America's conservatives the same way The Passion of the Christ did. It appealed to red state Bible thumpers and jingoistic gun wavers in the Deep South, Big Sky country, and Appalachian Mountains. A large section of America absolutely loved this movie about Chris Kyle, the deadliest sniper in American military history and a good old boy from Texas who embodied the Spark Notes version of American values in the way he could ride, fight, shoot, and drink. Not only that, but he was turned loose in Iraq to wreak divine vengeance on the enemy, saving the lives of countless Americana soldiers in the process as he extinguished evil from this earth. He ultimately died a martyr's death, not on the battlefield, but still in service to his country, trying to save those who came back from war. It is the perfect movie to appeal to people with simply worldviews. The movie establishes that Chris Kyle has a black and white sense of morality, and it never questions whether he is right or wrong. It takes that black and white mentality and reinforces its rightness by portraying the Iraqi insurgents as evil incarnate. It depicts Iraqis in general as untrustworthy others and more or less justifies Kyle's killing of them in the interest of saving American lives no matter what. The film is thus built to entirely on an oversimplified use of the dichotomy, and any ambiguity people might have is driven away by directorial choices. The most famous scene in the film is the opening where Kyle is forced to shoot a kid because he is about to throw a grenade at a convoy of Marines. The moment is loaded with tension, and we are to understand that Kyle was forced to make difficult life or death decisions on a daily basis. Yet, his decisions are always excused by the caveat that killing Iraqis saves American lives. The kid was bad and Iraqi, so let's not dwell on it. This is, of course, too simple by half. It strips any nuance or moral ambiguity from what is and was in reality a deeply ambiguous and complicated situation. It never questions the fact that the United States invaded a sovereign country, threw it into chaos, and then sent snipers out in its cities to kill Iraqis who opposed the invaders. Instead, we cheer these snipers for killing our enemies. We cheer because the enemy is defined as anyone who isn't us, who doesn't love our God or our way of life or look like us. A dangerous understanding of reality that in 2017 is becoming increasingly entrenched in American politics, society, and life. This is why this movie is deeply problematic. It offers a simple binary interpretation of a complex situation and then goes into cheering for your team without questioning the beliefs or circumstances underpinning their actions. And the Americans cheered. They cheered to the tune of $350 million. The media of course fell right into this trap. They fact-checked the film, noting some of its problematic aspects and the fact that Chris Kyle had a tendency to exaggerate and fabricate stories while openly referring to the Iraqis that he killed as savages. This is exactly the kind of criticism based in reality as is that conservative culture warriors cannot handle because it undermines the simplicity of their worldview. If the impossibly good Iraqi killing machine is actually not impossibly good, and if Iraqis, music, do not all deserve to be killed, then the house of cards upon which tens of millions of roadkill aficionados are resting their ideas about life would quickly come tumbling down. Fact that so many people did love this movie, vehemently defending it because it appealed to their tribal instincts in a way that was back then and not yet entirely clear should have tipped us off to the fact that the national nightmare of Donald Trump was nearly upon us. That so many people had either forgotten, ignored, or never learned the lessons of the Iraqi war and indeed were willing to close tribal and racial ranks behind a simplified reimagining of what happened there should have tipped us off. In our remarkable piece for Rolling Stone, Matatabi seems to have had some inkling of what was going on before the rest of us. Sniper is a movie whose politics are so ludicrous and idiotic that under normal circumstances, it would be beneath criticism. The only thing that forces us to take it seriously is the extraordinary fact that an almost exactly similar worldview consumed the walnut-sized mind of the president who got us into the war in our question. It's the fact that the movie is popular and actually makes sense to so many people that's the problem. Why didn't you warn us sooner, Matabi? I will say that on the merits as a film, Bradley Cooper is truly excellent as Chris Kyle. I think this was where I finally realized Bradley Cooper is a deeply talented real actor, not just our movie star. So maybe that is ultimately the takeaway from American Sniper. It heralded the arrival of a supremely talented actor, while hinting that parts of the country were buried so deep in their simplistic tribalism that they would be willing to let a fat orangey idiot drive the country into a dumpster as long as he reinforced their worldview. 2 autobiographical true stories of Americans embroiled in our conflict arrive in cinemas this week. Documentary Point and Shoot, which holds the narcissism and naive that of its self-styled American freedom fighter in Libya up for the world to see. And there's a Clint Eastwood biopic, which is determined to celebrate its all-Americana gunslinger, Navy SEAL sniper, Chris Kiley with a minimum of questions asked about the world beyond the end of his own garden path. Both suffer from the problem of viewing conflict solely through the prism of American idealism. This is not to say that Eastwood's film isn't worth a look, and you might even say there is something subversive about the fact audiences may well come away from it thinking about the positive aspects of more gun control. Even though for the subject is never mentioned outright, he brings an intensity to the story of our war through the eyes of Kyle, one of our which is frequently trained down the sight of a long-range rifle, ready to pick off anyone on the streets of Iraq, young children and women included, if he feels they pose a threat to his brothers. Bradley Cooper, bulked up beyond the point you would have believed it possible, plays him with a focus and sincerity that, coupled with the script, soft pedals on the real-life Kyle's lesser appealing attributes such as the racism which in his book led him to brand Iraqi savages. The film opens with him making his first kill, a child brandishing a grenade with a simple but effective march cut, throwing us back to his first deer kill in childhood that leads to our lengthy flashback showing how his finger comes again to be on the trigger. Kiley has had the notion of protecting others drummed into him by his father, who tells him that in a world of sheep and wolves, the music trick is to be a sheepdog. It's doubtful whether the average sheepdog killed upwards of 160 wolves and called it duty, but Kyle has no problem with his job. And Eastwood's film pushes the idea that war is hell misses the point. It's coming home that is truly infernal. Home for Kyle is as American as apple pie, with a loving wife, Sienna Miller, and 2 kids. Coming back after the concentration and the decision-making required on the streets of Fallujah, however, is something the grueling SEAL training doesn't prepare him for. The post-traumatic stress disorder, never mentioned by name, that he suffers from is again viewed entirely from his perspective. Music, he sees it not as a result of any lingering worries he may have about killing people, beauty because he can't do the sheepdog thing anymore. The film, though gripping and enjoyable as a piece of Hollywood deficit, is problematic because of its factual origins. By presenting Kyle as our protector in a kind of new Wild West against natives we never get to know, Eastwood fully allows the viewer to merely nod sagely in agreement with Kiley the legend, sympathetic to his plight, but without so much as a backward glance to the blood of others he waded through. It also presents PTSD in the most simplistic terms, suggesting that it doesn't take much more than a quick chat with other veterans to bring me back from the abyss. Fable and fact make here an uneasy mix. Navy SEAL Chris Kiley, the self-proclaimed most lethal sniper in the history of the United States military with 68 confirmed kills out of a suspected 255. Is it healthy to idolize a man like Kyle, whose skills pertain to mankind's most awful innovation? War cinema invariably invites the dilemma of our reality, often encouraged by incautious patriotism. Kyle is no doubt a brave man with some extraordinary ability, but Clint Eastwood's American Sniper makes a point of celebrating his lethality rather than his valor. Military is an unfortunate and necessary, but that doesn't make it any more appealing. There's something inherently perverse about entertaining a war cinema considering the distressing nature of bloodshed. Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan and more recently Peterberg's Lone Survivor suffered from a curious focus on camaraderie amidst action scenes designed meticulously to incite thrill. These form of thoughtless war films denigrate the incredibly companionship that soldiers must to experience, as well as diminish the fortitude that they demonstrate on the battlefield. These are films that make us revel in the simplicity of situations that just aren't simple. How can we be manipulated so that we're glad when our man is shot? American Sniper is an entertaining action film, but it shouldn't have been. There's a startling directness in which the Iraqi troops are alienated in Eastwood's film. They are clearly delineated as the enemy with a little thought as to the realities of our wartime adversary. This might be the natural and understandable conception of a soldier in the United States military amidst the turmoil of conflict, but it surely couldn't represent fact, and it certainly doesn't represent humanity appropriately. Consider Kyle's chief rival, an elusive and deadly Syrian sniper whose presence here is heralded by ominous music. It's the portrayal of an enemy, not a man. Biosada war films are inherently difficult because they force us to support the characters that we're privy to. In this case, The American soldiers. We want them to survive. We want them to kill their enemies. Far more considered Eastwood's approach to the concept of farm murderers' employment. American Sniper presents information and leaves judgment to the viewer. How does one detach themselves from their deeds in war? Crucially upping Carl's tours of duty, his family life back home in Texas, and his commitment to wife Sienna Miller. There's a sense that Kyle hurting his family life more by dismissing the adverse effects that his job might be having on him. Bradley Cooper's Kyle offers a complexity that belies the rest of the film. Kyle joined the military at the relatively late age of 30, but demonstrated promise quickly, eventually joining SEAL Team 3 and combated during the Second Gulf War. There's a turbulence to Cooper's performance, pushing Kyle beyond caricature into something startlingly real. His confidence wanes between false and genuine music, as does his modesty. We're never sure how Kyle feels about the lives he's taken because the man probably doesn't know himself. Cooper is perfectly understated, and considering the actor's renown, it's impressive how easy it is to forget the element of fun performance. American Sniper is not so much a war film as it is a modern spaghetti western with a gun-towing Kyle facing down his enemies in a broken-down, lawless environment. As an action film, Eastwood's film is successful thanks in no small part to a magnetic central performance from Cooper. Eastwood has a natural instinct for cinema despite our reluctance to push himself creatively. But does the Gulf War deserve more consideration? Is it irresponsible filmmaking to present such a complicated scenario without reflection? As an experience so far, sensation American Sniper is gripping, but intellectually it's jarring. After a weeks or maybe even months of seeing the trailer for American Sniper, which can only be related to a teaser, it really was a fantastic trailer which made you want to come and watch the film to find out if he took that shot. Great way to promote a film, and even better that it actually started with that scene. But we don't get to find out straight away. The suspense was very good, building that up even more as we started to learn a little about the man about to pull the trigger and his past. I thought the story was told in an incredible way. Wouldn't expect anything less really with Clint Eastwood in the director's chair. The way it built him up and gave viewers a good understanding of his background really helped to explain his motivation and determination to do things. Something which would really help him to make it as a SEAL. A natural shooter, as his father told him after his first kill hunting in the woods. It is an incredibly emotional journey as we see him quickly become a hero amongst the troops with his skills of shooting from up above and keeping a watch over the troops on the ground. But his determination to do even more really did push it to the limits. He wasn't just going to watch all of the time. He wanted to be even more involved in it all. He completed 4 tours altogether, and we can see how he was becoming more and more detached with life when returning home after each tour. He seemed to be very addictive and did know to communicate very well with his wife and young children after his stints away. It was quite heartbreaking to watch at times, especially when his wife had to listen to gunshots and fire over the phone a couple of times. Can't really think of much worse to listen to than that. Bradley Cooper really does put in a fantastic performance and certainly bulked up for the role. We felt sorry for him but could also understand his reasons for wanting to keep going back. He wanted to keep saving more men and felt that it was his duty to protect everyone back at home. Some of the scenes really were touching and hit our core. I had no idea of the outcome of the story, so was devastated at the very end. I won't spoil that in case you don't know the story either. I honestly just sank, and then the no music over the credits after video footage and photos was really hard hitting. Everyone just sat still at the screening I was at. There really are some good films based around war, and this one is certainly one of them as well. I think with it being a very recent story makes it even harder to watch as well. Chris Kyle became a legend for how many enemies he killed and how many of his own troops he managed to save. Something which much inspire the people who are out on tour. I have to give the Academy some credit. At least one of the movies they nominated for Best Picture was an of the best movies of the year. American Sniper, the story of Christopher Kyle, the most lethal sniper in US military history, is a great film, an important film, and I hope every theater showing it is as packed as mine was for this film. How is it that we've been at war now for well over a decade and no one cares? Maybe you do. But in the conversations I have and the overall effect it has on daily life is negligible to non-existent. Whatever you may think about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, They happened. They're still happening. US troops area fighting, and there are no massive air protests or national dialogue about it. Despite all the public statements about supporting the troops, many of the men and women who served in these conflicts continued to face serious challenges. Countless service members remain in dangerous situations overseas, and those who return home often struggle with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other lasting emotional and psychological wounds that reshape their everyday lives. For anyone interested in understanding the realities veterans face after returning home, Thank You for Your Service by David Finkel offers a deeply moving and insightful perspective. This raises an important question: where has Hollywood been throughout all of this? The film industry has never been shy about addressing political and social issues. During and after the Vietnam War, Hollywood produced countless films exploring its impact. It has tackled nearly every major social issue imaginable. Yet when it comes to the events following 9/11 and the attacks that changed the world and the wars that followed, Hollywood has been surprisingly quiet. A handful of powerful films have covered this period, most notably United 93 and Zero Dark 30. While other movies have explored related themes, those are the first two that usually come to mind. However, both primarily focus on the September 11th attacks and the hunt for Osama bin Laden. American Sniper stands apart as the first major film to deliver a powerful examination of the Iraq War itself. Anchored by exceptional performances and masterful direction, it tells the story of Chris Kyle, portrayed by Bradley Cooper. The film follows Kyle from his early life as a Texas cowboy through meeting and marrying his wife, played by Sienna Miller, before showing his decision to join the U.S. Navy SEALs after the September 11th attacks. Kyle is driven by deep patriotism and an unwavering commitment to protecting the soldiers beside him. Recognizing his extraordinary talent as a marksman, he believes his skills can save lives by providing cover for troops clearing buildings on the ground. That sense of duty ultimately leads him back to Iraq for 4 combat tours. Along the way, the film thoughtfully explores the personal cost of his service, showing the gradual strain it places on his marriage, his mental health, and ultimately his soul. I've always considered Bradley Cooper to be a talented actor. While I personally think Silver Linings Playbook receives more praise than it deserves, Cooper delivered a strong performance. In American Hustle, surrounded by outstanding actors like Christian Bale and Amy Adams, he more than held his own, earning another Academy Award nomination. Those earlier performances showcased Cooper's energetic, unpredictable, and often comedic side. In American Sniper, however, he undergoes a complete transformation. He physically bulked up for the role and convincingly embodies the appearance and presence of a Navy SEAL. Although Chris Kyle possessed a sharp sense of humor, he was also a man driven by an intense determination to protect the vulnerable from those who preyed upon them. His relationship with his wife is portrayed with warmth and authenticity, and Cooper and Sienna Miller share remarkable chemistry. Their believable connection makes the emotional toll that war takes on their marriage all the more heartbreaking. The film also subtly portrays Kyle's growing struggle with PTSD between deployments. Rather than interrupting the narrative, these moments are woven naturally into the story. Everyday sounds and ordinary situations become emotional triggers, revealing just how difficult it is for Kyle to readjust to civilian life. Bradley Cooper's Academy Award nomination was well-deserved, and his performance is strong enough to merit a Best Actor win. The film's other standout force is director Clint Eastwood, who took over the project after Steven Spielberg stepped away. While I've often admired Eastwood's career, I've also found some of his films slow-paced and overly deliberate. If I had watched American Sniper without knowing who directed it, I never would have guessed it was Eastwood. In my view, this is his finest work since Unforgiven. Although the film runs for nearly 2.5 hours, its pacing remains consistently engaging. Eastwood keeps Kyle's story moving with confidence, whether the scene involves a quiet conversation in a bar or an intense battlefield confrontation. His visual storytelling is especially impressive. During the climactic rooftop battle, he alternates between close-quarters action and sweeping aerial shots that clearly establish the soldiers' tactical positions. The result is an exciting and easy-to-follow sequence that immerses the audience in the battle without relying on unnecessary exposition. Despite receiving a well-earned Directors Guild nomination, Eastwood was overlooked for an Academy Award nomination. Even so, it's difficult to dwell on the omission given his legendary career and remarkable collection of awards. What's most impressive is seeing a filmmaker in his mid-80s continue to challenge himself and deliver work of this quality. When I saw American Sniper, the theater was completely packed, with people even sitting in the aisles and hallways. The emotional impact was unmistakable, as several audience members around me were visibly moved to tears. It's easy to imagine strong word of mouth carrying this film to an even wider audience. Ultimately, American Sniper succeeds because it combines a remarkable true story with outstanding performances and confident direction. It may well become the defining cinematic portrayal of the Second Iraq War. As award season gathered momentum, the film seemed to be gaining increasing support, and deservedly so. It's a film worthy of Best Picture consideration. Chris Kyle became the deadliest sniper in U.S. military history, recording more than 160 confirmed kills during 4 tours in Iraq. To Iraqi insurgents, he was enemy number one, with a reward reportedly placed on his head. To American troops, however, he was their guardian angel. Simply knowing Kyle was watching over them gave many soldiers greater confidence on the battlefield, helping cement his reputation as a military legend. However, Clint Eastwood's American Sniper is often more interested in presenting Kyle's legendary status than fully exploring the complexities of the man behind it. As a boy, Kyle's father taught him that the world is divided into 3 kinds of people: sheep, who are vulnerable and unable to defend themselves; wolves, who prey on the weak; and sheepdogs, who possess the strength and aggression needed to protect others. Kyle grows up believing he is destined to be one of those sheepdogs. Motivated by the U.S. Embassy bombings in East Africa, he joins the Navy SEALs and is eventually deployed to Iraq. As his reputation grows, he is assigned increasingly dangerous and specialized missions. One of his most important assignments is helping eliminate the notorious Al-Qaeda operative known as the Butcher. At the same time, he becomes determined to track down Mustafa, a highly skilled Iraqi sniper whose abilities rival his own. The film opens with one of its most gripping and suspenseful sequences. Positioned on a rooftop in Fallujah, Kyle watches over a U.S. military convoy, scanning the streets for potential threats. He notices a woman and her young son leaving a nearby building. Something about her behavior immediately raises his suspicions. She hands the child an object before he begins running toward the approaching convoy. Kyle fears it could be a grenade, but he can't be certain. He radios his team for confirmation, yet no one else has a clear view. His commanding officer authorizes him to engage if necessary. Now Kyle faces an impossible decision: does the child carry a grenade, or is he about to make a tragic mistake? American Sniper opens with a gripping moral dilemma. Does Chris Kyle pull the trigger, or does he hold his fire? It's a powerful introduction that immediately sets the film apart from most modern war movies. Instead of relying on fast-paced chaos and split-second decisions, the opening unfolds with deliberate tension. Kyle has time to think, weigh the consequences of his actions, and make an impossible choice. That quiet suspense becomes one of the film's most compelling strengths. Unfortunately, after such a remarkable opening, the rest of the film never quite reaches the same emotional intensity. Focused primarily on presenting Chris Kyle as a heroic figure, American Sniper leaves little room to question the morality or purpose of the Iraq War. While the film briefly acknowledges that this conflict is unlike previous wars with women and children being used in combat, it ultimately portrays the mission as unquestionably noble, avoiding any deeper examination of its complexities. Much of this perspective comes from Kyle himself. He views Iraq through a narrow lens, seeing it as a land of danger and its people largely as enemies. Director Clint Eastwood makes little effort to humanize the Iraqi characters, particularly Mustafa, who is portrayed almost like a comic book villain. Without exploring the broader political or historical context of the war, the story narrows its focus to Kyle's personal mission to eliminate Mustafa and the brutal insurgent known as the Butcher. The film does spend some time exploring post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and the challenges veterans face when returning to civilian life. Kyle gradually becomes more comfortable with his fellow soldiers in Iraq than with his own family back home. It's an important theme, although it's explored more deeply and effectively in The Hurt Locker. In American Sniper, these emotional struggles often take a backseat to scenes that emphasize heroism and patriotic inspiration. One of the biggest challenges in telling the true story of a celebrated war hero is balancing respect with honesty. That challenge becomes even greater in a country where military service is deeply honored. As a result, the film often prioritizes admiration over critical reflection. Even so, American Sniper is clearly a heartfelt project. Bradley Cooper delivers a committed and convincing performance as Chris Kyle, while Clint Eastwood directs with confidence and sincerity. The film contains several genuinely powerful moments, although its strong patriotic tone and larger-than-life portrayal of heroism may resonate more with American audiences than with viewers elsewhere. At its core, American Sniper offers an engaging look into the life of legendary Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle. The biographical drama balances his personal relationships, extraordinary military career, growing fame, and the psychological scars left behind by war. More importantly, it illustrates how prolonged combat slowly changes a soldier, leaving Kyle feeling more at home on the battlefield than in the peaceful life he once knew. From the moment the screen fades to black, the film establishes an intense atmosphere. A deep, thunderous bass fills the soundtrack, creating an immediate sense of power and tension. Credit goes to the film's outstanding sound design, which enhances every moment. A heavily armored tank rolls through the battlefield like a relentless predator, crushing everything in its path as soldiers advance on their mission. Nearby, Kyle lies motionless on a rooftop beside another sniper, carefully scanning the streets below while casually exchanging jokes. Then comes the film's unforgettable opening sequence. A woman secretly carries a grenade and quietly hands it to her young son, urging him toward the approaching American convoy. The child runs forward, unaware that he is being watched through a sniper's scope. The suspense is almost unbearable. A single gunshot suddenly transports the audience into Kyle's childhood. The story flashes back to his early years, where his father teaches him how to hunt and shoot, laying the foundation for the man he would eventually become. It's an exceptionally well-directed transition and one of the film's finest moments. The beautifully crafted prologue immediately signals that viewers are about to witness a compelling story. The film follows Chris Kyle's journey across all 4 of his combat tours, capturing the experiences that made him a legendary figure among American soldiers. Alongside the action is an emotional subplot centered on his wife, who longs for her husband to return home safely. Their relationship highlights the personal sacrifices made by military families and reinforces the emotional cost of war. Perhaps the film's greatest achievement is its portrayal of the lasting psychological impact of combat. It shows that while soldiers may survive the battlefield physically, the emotional wounds often remain long after the fighting has ended. Directed by Clint Eastwood and written by Jason Hall, American Sniper is based on Chris Kyle's autobiography. The film stars Bradley Cooper in the lead role, with cinematography by Tom Stern and editing by Joel Cox. It was produced by Village Roadshow Pictures and distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures. The film premiered on November 11, 2014, has a running time of 132 minutes, and was produced in the United States in the English language. Made on a budget of approximately $59 million, American Sniper became a massive commercial success, earning $547.7 million at the worldwide box office.